Welcome to Beyond Bacalhau, Cracking the Portuguese Business Cod by Raquel Batista. Welcome to the second episode of my podcast, Beyond Bacalhau, and this is the first episode that I have a guest, and this is my dear Sarah David, which is here with me. She was one of the first persons that when I started this business, I actually met and networked with, and out of the blue, she kind of believed in me and all my projects, so I'm eternally grateful. And I love Sarah because she's a very proactive person. I know she's standing right here, so it's weird to talk about her, but she really is a fantastic person. She's one of the persons that I think integrated better here in Portugal, and she's been here only a few months. So we've talked like 2.5 years ago, but she wasn't here. She was living in the UK, and now she's here, and it's like she knows more about this than I do, and I've been Portuguese all my life. So getting that out of the way, Sarah, please explain us a little bit about yourself, like your background and what you do.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for that wonderful introduction. Really kind of you. It was lovely to meet you the first time and for us to be in touch since then. And, you know, you sort of almost following my journey. And then one day I was like, I think I'm going to move to Portugal. You know, it is great. And now I'm here. And to be honest, I could have done, but it certainly made the transition easier knowing people like yourself, I have to admit, because the support that I had, because I did move by myself. So, you know, there is an element of at least, you know, that if there's any issues or questions that, you know, there's people you can turn to. But I would say even if people are not in the same position as me and they don't have that support network straight away, everybody is super friendly, whether it be expats or other Portuguese people that I meet. It's a genuine offer of help that if you need any help, please contact me. And I think that is lovely. And I'd like to say, you know, you can see that in other countries, I don't know, I've never lived there, but certainly I think that is something that the Portuguese do offer people, which is lovely. I come originally from a town called Durham, in the northeast of England, and then I've lived down in London, and I've always done foreign exchange, help people move their money internationally. Traditionally, it was people from the UK wanting to move to Canada, America, New Zealand, Australia. Not the stress, but the big life-changing decisions that comes with of moving country. Portugal specifically, whether it be Americans, Canadians, people from the UK, Australia, around the world wanting to move to Portugal. I am now doing it myself, interestingly.
So you have like a first-hand experience. I bet that's like really useful for your clients as well, because if you've been through it, you can have their experience and be in their shoes, so to speak. So you can have a lot of empathy for them, whatever they're feeling, because you've been there.
Yeah, I mean, I can appreciate how, you know, it's overwhelming. There is lots to think about, and, you know, the logistics of it all, what do you need to consider? And then even sort of when you get here, to be honest. I mean, even myself, I'm probably now, 6 months in actually, and it is interesting because I think there's still, as much as I love Portugal, I would advocate for it 100% for people to move here. It's a wonderful place to live. There's still that sort of, you know, honeymoon period in any country of how it's exciting, and then when that wears off and then this becomes real life, you know, it's sort of adapting and settling. And obviously there's the emotional ups and downs of, yes, it's lovely here, I've made lots of new friends, but you still have friends and family in another country, which, you know, obviously you don't get to see all the time. So, you know, I do think that, you know, not to put people off at all, but remind yourself of the positive.
How did you adjust, and how was your adaptation to a very different culture and speed, considering UK versus Portugal?
I think it's one of the reasons that people want to move there, because it is a slightly slower pace of life. There's probably a better life-work balance, which I think we all really need. But then sometimes I suppose it can get a little bit frustrating because things are very slow. So then there's the thought of balance. You sort of, I wish that was quicker. But then the benefit of being slower, you know, you take a little bit more time for lunch, which is nice. You as I said, the life work balance is better. So there's the sort of trade-off slightly sometimes that you find. The other thing as well is that as much as everybody's friendly and there's lots of, expat meetups and there's lots of things you can do, you do need to really put yourself out there. Be careful not to sort of move somewhere and isolate yourself too much. You've got to get out and meet people. They're not necessarily going to come in your front door. Yes, there's a lot of online meetups, and people become friends online, which that's great as well. But you do need the social interaction, so you do need to get out. But there's plenty of, as I said, meetups. For me, I'm quite fortunate. I'm here and I can work here. There's a lot of digital nomads that people come to work here, and it's great because then you're more likely to interact with people, meet up with people for a coffee or a lunch, or there's networking opportunities, things like that. But if you're not working, I think that's where it can become a bit more challenging, that you need to sort of, as I said, really make the effort to go along to meetups and but people are super friendly. I think even if you just even in small towns, you go along to the local coffee shops, you'll soon start chatting to locals. Everybody's quite friendly. And I think you'll find friends in no time.
One of the things that I'd like to ask you about, because a lot of people tell me this. First of all, in my view, I think there's kind of an expat bubble. So where the communities kind of isolate themselves. And so it's very, as friendly as Portuguese are, then there's another degree of real friendship. And that's a very hard thing for an expat to be in. So we are friendly, but a lot of people, what they say is that it's not the same thing as being a friend of a Portuguese, which is a completely different thing. And because we're so family oriented, it's very difficult, like weekends and late nights and such, because we have our family here, so naturally we have more family obligations. And so the expats, I think, feel a bit like, okay, now what are we going to do? And what I think you do really well is that you don't stay within that bubble. I'm not even talking about the Portuguese people, but you kind of spread internationally and network like without borders. And I think that's also a key thing, but that's probably a difficult thing for people that don't integrate as well. But I think you do that really well. And I would like to know, because, I know nobody knows or thinks that, but I am an extreme introvert, Sarah. And so how the hell do you do that? So how do you integrate into Portuguese kind of living?
Again, going back to it, it's easier to mix with expats because it is. Because they speak the same language, you already have something in common because you've moved to another country, and it is easy to stay within that, and it's a comfort sort of zone. So there is an element that maybe you do need to sort of push yourself out a little bit of your comfort zone to try and approach other people. That's probably the first thing that I would say. I think there's a couple of things really. One is trying to find places. As I said, if you I live between Cascais and Lisbon, and I live in a place that's slightly more residential, but very more Portuguese. So actually, where I am, most people are Portuguese, and there's not a lot of expats. So I think maybe the further in sort of smaller villages and further north or south, if you're not in sort of Cascais or maybe Lisbon, you're more likely to find locals. So as I said, it's a case of being a bit more active, going out to those cafes and just having a chat with somebody and doing that sort of thing, rather than, yes, I still would recommend that you go to the expat meetups, but it's trying to go to places that, the Portuguese are not going to necessarily go to an expat meetup. So it's trying to do things, whether it be activities, because actually, I've joined a gym. And it is all in Portuguese, the classes. There's a lot of Portuguese that go to it. So again, it's probably trying to find not necessarily a hobby or an activity or go to a cafe that isn't full of expats, it's got more locals, just to start having those conversations, and you might not become friends overnight. It might take a little bit more time, but I would persevere with it.
That's a great idea to join the local gym, because there are gyms like here in Quinta da Marinha. The gym is I'll bet it's 80% expat, so it's not a good place to get integrated. But other than that, in Oeiras, Carcavelos, other places like that, gyms are really a good place to be and to connect, because I bet the majority of people will be Portuguese. The other thing that I would like to talk to you about is about the Portuguese and learning Portuguese, because everybody says it's very difficult, and it is a very difficult language. But one of the things that makes it difficult is because whenever you're talking to a Portuguese, the Portuguese always revert to English whenever we realize that that Portuguese is not your first language. And so then you don't get to really practice in real life, because everybody knows a little bit of English, and of course we're helpers, and so there we go, and try to connect to you. So how is your Portuguese? How important is that? How are you approaching that?
Okay, so I would love to learn Portuguese for two reasons. One, because I think it's nice to just be able to speak to some locals and integrate more myself. And also, I haven't been here for very long, but at the moment I enjoy it and would like to live here more permanently. So in 5 years' time, you need to have the language test in order to get the visa in 5 years' time. So that's sort of in my mind as well. I think what I did was, but it was too soon. There is the local school doing classes. I paid about 22 euros to register, and then it's free twice a week. So it's 4 hours really, 2 hours each time, twice a week, and you get homework, and it's for 12 months, and then you get an exam at the end. And for each session, the 2 hours, the woman speaks Portuguese to you the whole time. So it is quite intense. And I do think that sort of immersive approach is probably what I do need. But sort of this was 4 months in, and it was maybe a bit too much, given that I was trying to meet new people and integrate, and I just took too much. I think I was trying too hard to make this work. You do worry, you want to make sure that you make friends, you want to make sure that work's going well, you want to make sure that you want to fit in here. But I think sometimes you put a bit too much pressure on yourself, that you've got time and you can give yourself a little bit of break, certainly with the language, before you start to maybe seriously learn it. And I think what I thought was that I would try my best to learn a little bit of the language myself, not conversational, but try and learn a few sentences and try and learn a little bit more as a base before I start a commitment like that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, sure. You talked a bit about your business, and now I would really like to focus on that. So not only how do you work here, because you're working remotely, I think it's a UK company, right?
Yes.
that you're in. So how do you feel, and how is it going working remotely for a company that's not here, it's not local? And if that's if you felt that it was different from being there, how was the adjustment from probably a few days in person to full remote? And how was that adaptation?
I was quite lucky in as far as this is really what sort of brought me here. I mean, I made the decision to move personally because I thought it was the right decision for me, and it felt like home, Portugal, basically. So I went to my bosses and was like, I would like to move to Portugal. Would you support that? But I had been coming with work. That's what brought me here originally. So for them to say, yes, that's fine, it was a fit, really. So I've managed to still carry on my business doing it here. I still have, partners around the world or in the UK. So again, that kind of the contact. But I think since sort of, COVID a little bit, some of the interactions with people were Zooms, telephone calls. So you can still do business that way anyway, even though I'm here and I'm speaking to people in the UK. If you are a digital nomad and your business isn't necessarily in Portugal, but you choose to live here, because you could, if you work remotely, you could technically live in any country.
Oh, yeah.
I have friends that have moved and gone to other places. For me, the time difference, I would probably stick to Europe because that makes more sense. Again, other European countries are a good fit for what I do. But I've had friends move to other countries and they work different hours to try and accommodate the time difference. Now, that I personally couldn't do that, but that's obviously something some people choose to do. The bit that I think people need to sort of think about how they manage is more communication with the people at work. So is it regular telephone calls, or is it set something up once a week just to sort of feel that you're still connected? I'm flying back next week to go to the work Christmas dinner, because I think it'd be lovely to see everyone and keep up that sort of social aspect of the team. In Portugal itself, I generally work from home. So I try to go and meet people like yourself for a coffee or a lunch, or to try and get out and meet people, obviously. There's a couple of people that I've met. One woman organised like a co-working from her house. So there was a couple of us that went along. And we all said sort of the similar things, that sometimes working from home, you can, lose a little bit of a lull or lose a bit of productivity. That's sort of, sometimes working from home. And we all said it was lovely working with other people, even if they're completely different industry. It's just, we felt we were more productive together, and then we would come together and just have a chat and brainstorm some ideas. And so I think some people I've seen, there are co-working spaces, and I think that's something that to bear in mind or try, depending on your connections. There's a couple of people that I work with that have kindly offered that I can go work from their office. She sometimes goes and dog sits for her friend and works from her house. So sometimes it's just to change the scenery.
Sarah, can you explain exactly what you do? Because I always say, if you can explain it to a 4-year-old, you know what you're doing, and everybody else can understand. So we've talked at length about your business, and even, how it could be useful to have you as a partner in my business, because I build businesses and I create companies. And of course, people need to move money to create their companies here, and they probably sold their things there where they were, and so they now need to move their money here. And most importantly, in real estate operations, where you really need to know timing of the transfer. But please explain exactly what it is that you do.
No, absolutely. I was having this conversation with somebody yesterday at work, and everybody in their own industry has terminology or things that you're talking, talking to somebody who knows it, and it's very easy to become too technical. And actually, do people really understand that term that you're using, and do they really, you make it more complicated than it really needs to be. So I think that's in a lot of industries. But essentially, we help people move their money around the world. So in this instance, say you're living in America, you're thinking about moving to Portugal, you've got US dollars, and simply you need euros. And there needs to be a transfer from your US bank. The money needs to be converted, and then it needs to be put in a beneficiary account, whether that be your own account in Portugal or whether that be a third party. So if you're buying a property, it might be sent to a lawyer, or it might be sent direct to the seller. That's the bottom line. And within that, there are a few different aspects to consider. One is obviously the process of moving your money from one bank to another. What's involved in that? We've seen clients find that banks have limits on how much money you can move. There might be time delays, between the bank clearing times. There's compliance involved, and sometimes that can hold up the money. So there's all that sort of aspect around just the process and the transfer of money that then can impact how quickly you get your money to Portugal. Now, if you've got no deadlines, that's not a problem. But often people don't think about this in advance. They only think about it when it's needed. So, for example, you'd say to them, right, you need to pay this invoice, or you need to get this money by this date for your property. That's when people, all right, I need to make that payment now. But actually, can you get the money there in time?
Yeah.
You know, it is sort of trying to get people to think about this a little bit earlier, so that then you don't encounter the problems just with the process of moving the money. And that's before we even talk about price and cost.
Oh, yeah. Because I want you to go there.
Exactly.
Definitely.
It was interesting. I was just thinking about this because we're coming up to Black Friday, where there's discounts and things like that. And, you know, exchanging your money is not the same as sort of retail products, in as far as there's a set price, or is there any seasonality to it? Can I get a discount code? Can I get a deal on a Black Friday? It really doesn't work like that. And the challenge then for people is when they're trying to budget for a move to Portugal or any country, it's very difficult because your time frames you're thinking about maybe 12 months. So in that 12 months, there could be so many different fluctuations in the price. And all of a sudden, you moving your money to Portugal on this date is $1,000 more expensive, or it's $10,000 more expensive. Or
it's a lot of money that we're moving. So a little difference can make like a ton of money in the end.
Exactly. And it's sort of managing that, giving the guidance on, in your time frames, when can we be buying those euros to make it more affordable for you, or just control the budget, or especially if you're buying property and you're giving dates, you know now how much that's going to cost you. It's all about sort of a little bit of protection, or we can monitor rates and trying to get a good exchange rate for you. And certainly at the moment it is quite topical. Obviously, we are seeing more people want to move to Portugal, but the rates are very good. I mean, if you're selling US dollars and you're buying euros, apart from when we hit parity in 2022, we are at 22-year highs.
Yeah.
So it's a very good time to be buying your euros. Now, some people that are in early stages think, well, that's fine, but I don't have a euro account, because with your bank, you need somewhere to put it. So again, we offer a solution where we can hold the money very similar to a bank account. It's in your name, and we can hold euros in advance for you. If you didn't want to buy all the euros up front, maybe your money's earning higher interest in an account in the US, we've got a facility where we can lock the rate with just a 10% deposit. So there's lots of different options. But I think for what I try and get people to do is that you need to start thinking about this earlier than you would normally, or that people do.
How is your relationship, or how has it been your experience with Portuguese banks?
It's similar to, US banks, for example. You'd have thought, that they would, yes, there is technology and they're more forward thinking, but they're still just as antiquated. Americans can go into their branch and a lot of the tellers have never done an international transfer before. A number of times we've had clients do like a video call from their bank, or call us saying, can you speak to the bank teller? I don't know what they're doing, but and obviously if you've not done it before, they're asking you questions that you don't know the answers to, so that's the sort of what we're up against a little bit, and that's not a Portuguese bank. So I think, a lot of banks are quite similar in a way that they maybe haven't moved as far forward as we thought that they would at this point in this day and age. And then again, sort of dealing with the banks. But that's the other thing, is that being an intermediary, we are speaking to the banks. So if there's questions around the payment, we can react quite quickly. Whereas if you're waiting for the Portuguese bank to speak to a US bank, that communication is quite slow. Whereas if we're sending the money to a Portuguese bank, they'll ask us the questions because the money's come from us.
Yeah.
So we can get involved. Whereas we've got clients that maybe have done it through their bank or another provider, and they've gone to their Portuguese account and they're asking for our help. We try and help as much as we can, but if we're not involved in the transfer, there's only so much that we can do.
So it's actually better to have someone like you or your company to actually intermediate this, because then you establish a relationship with a lot of different banks, and they obviously inherently trust you after they've worked with you for a while. That's I wanted to ask two questions. One is, how do you classify or think about the level of service that we have in Portuguese bank and how that compares internationally? And the other is, let's suppose a bank is internationally present. You'd still consider using, or it would still be better to use your company, even if that bank is present, like in the US and Portugal or other countries, because in my experience, even though it's the same brand, it's the same bank, it's like completely different realities. And it's not even a given that people will communicate well between each other. Level of service, and even if the bank has, is spread around internationally, it would still be useful to use the services, right?
It always depends on where your bank's based, as in like not necessarily, country, but also in the state. If we're talking about America, which state it's in, and then obviously in Portugal, where's your branch, what kind of local branch it is, as to the people in that branch. That's the challenge. Do you have premier banking, or so there's different levels, and again that goes into the different types of service. And what I've always find interesting, certainly with America, is that you can have one brand of bank, but then within each state it differs. So again, it still goes down to the person in that branch and their knowledge and experience. But then equally, one state might charge more than another state, but it's the same bank. It's just in a different state. So there's that kind of level. And I saw it a little bit when I was working years ago, helping people move to Canada. The HSBC have in Canada, and they have it in the UK. And they were, I've got a bank account with HSBC in the UK. I'll have it in Canada because I'm with HSBC. It'll be the same. But they had to open a brand new bank account. It was almost like it was a completely different bank, and they don't really talk to each other as you would have thought that they would. And it's the same with a lot of companies, and I've experienced that a little bit myself with, Vodafone. I have Vodafone in the UK. I'm now with Vodafone in Portugal, but actually it doesn't really make any difference because they're completely separate. And I've seen it with a few different brands that they have it exists in the UK and exists here in Portugal, but essentially you might as well be with two different companies.
Yeah, and I mean, I know that there's a solid reason that that's happening, is because companies that are based or that have to operate out of the European Union obviously have some rules that are not at all the same as the US rules, or let's say even the UK rules with the FSA and such. So of course you have to really adjust and keep that in mind, that it's different jurisdictions, different laws, different obligations. So of course banks will even act and allow different things. But still, the funny thing is the lack of communication between them. And that's something that I felt as well. And I wanted to ask you. So apparently that's the same. So how about the level of service with banks in Portugal? Because sometimes people, and like yesterday, I got an email that infuriated me because there was a potential client like coming in and, oh, I'm not sure if I'm going to move to Portugal because this Facebook group tells me that it's all a fraud, it's all a lie, there's a lot of crime, everything is horrible. And I was like, do those people live here? If they live here and they dislike it so much, why are they still here? So obviously, in terms of logic, it doesn't really make sense that people, trashing Portugal are still here because they have, the door and they can go back anytime. And I had to go and remember and go through the websites of the ranking of Portugal among the safest places in the world, among the best places to live in the world, with Porto and Lisbon being one of the, of the 20 cities best to live in the world. And I'm like, okay, so these are objective facts. Mm-hmm. So how do you consider knowledge of Facebook groups of people that are behind screens and you don't even know who they are, what the experience is, with these facts and the fact that everybody keeps coming in. So I'm sure there's a reason, right? So sometimes people trash the level of service of Portuguese companies and all. And I would like your take on it.
Well, personally, that's one of the things I do. I mean, I'm very lucky. It depends where you are in Portugal, but my overall experience so far, and I've travelled up and down Portugal and been to many different towns, and even like in Lisbon, I'm a woman and I travel about by myself. Sometimes I come out from a restaurant, it's dark and it's late after dinner, and I walk back to a hotel, and I honestly say that I felt safe. I've never felt intimidated, and sometimes, yes, you pass groups of young people or whatever, and I've never felt threatened. Whereas in the UK, there's times where I have, or I wouldn't consider doing that because I wouldn't maybe feel safe. So I must admit, I feel very safe here. So from a level of crime, I think certainly it's much, much better than the UK, and I imagine it would be better than America, for example. I have personally I did join a lot of Facebook groups when I got here because I wanted to find out more about things that were happening in my area. And there is that there's there's coming here, visas, what do I need to do, to now I'm here, now what do I need, could you recommend a dentist, or what's a good restaurant in my area, or is there any events in my area? It's trying to live here and know those kind of things that you need. But I have to say that I have had to come off some of the Facebook groups because I find it very overwhelming. I've used experts to get here and I paid for it, and it was money well spent because the visa, it is stressful. As much as the language is very good, these documents need to be in Portuguese. You need certain things. Taking a lawyer to the AIMA appointment was worth its weight in gold, making sure I had all the documents. It's so stressful because I really wanted to move here. So I wanted to make sure that I didn't do anything wrong, because what happens if you went and you didn't have the right documentation, or they were asking you questions and you couldn't answer them? Then what? I mean, getting an appointment, whether it be VFS, AIMA, is very difficult. So you need it to go well, because getting another one, I don't know how you do that, really, to be honest.
And it's such a pivotal time in your life. Like, if there's a moment to invest in a professional and an expert, is when you're moving to a country that you don't know, with laws that you don't know. And, it's the first time you've moved even from country to country and gotten a visa. So,
yeah. And I know people could say, you can save money doing it yourself. But sometimes in some, as you said, parts of your life, it is worthwhile spending that little bit of money just to remove that stress and hassle at the end of the day. Personally, it makes such a difference. And the thing with the Facebook groups, as you said, there are people that say this and this, but are they a credible source? What's their full situation? Because it's all right saying, this person's done this and this, but what was their situation? It could be completely different to yours. They don't like it. Where are they living? Yeah. Have they moved somewhere too remote, and actually that's not a fit for them? So again, I'm not saying that everywhere in Portugal is perfect, but you've got to find the right spot for you, the right fit. So some places, like if you go out to the Avantasia, people live on Quintas, it's lovely. It's a little bit too remote for me. So I wouldn't want to live there, but it suits a lot of people. They wouldn't want to live in a city that's busier. So again, you've got to find the right fit for you. And like I say, some people, might struggle to make friends, but what are they doing about that? How are they going about that? So again, it's understanding their situation. And if you're a different type of person, you might not have the same experience.
Yeah. The thing that really infuriates me is that a lot of those people in those Facebook groups are not Portuguese. They're actually expats, of course, relying on their own personal experience, which is not comparable with anyone else, but then think that they really know the system much better than Portuguese people or lawyers that have been here all their lives, know the system, know the people, know how things work. And I see a lot of clients come to me with completely wrong ideas, completely false things that they believe because they've heard off of a Facebook freaking group. And so I'm glad that you also have that experience, and it's not me. Like, it's an objective thing. Those Facebook groups really are damaging not only the experience of people, but also they're not encouraging people to request help from experts. They're like, it's very easy. You do this, 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 and this, when that's not the case. That's really not what's it about. Sarah, we're like at our limit, but I would really like you to say your whatever you want to say. This is a completely free podcast. It's mine, so it's my responsibility. So I don't care anyway. We can do whatever we want to. And
I think you can apply that to all the experts that are involved in this sort of process. Is that generally we find it the same in our industry as you probably would with yours, or a lawyer that's helping with the visa. Somebody doesn't take your service initially. They go off and do it themselves, whether that be with another provider, with their bank, or trying to do the visa themselves. They encounter some sort of problem, whether it be with the visa, whether it be the money's not there in time, or it's being held up with compliance, or they've used an online provider and the money's stuck there and they can't contact anybody. Then they come to you. Obviously we're happy to help and want to, but it's more difficult because your money's stuck over there. Unless you've got more money, then that's great, because then we can still transfer the money for you to buy that property. But if you haven't, you've got to wait till that money's cleared, and there's not a lot anybody can do. But equally then with a visa, if you come and you're sort of part way through and you've made a mess of it,
now you have to solve a problem.
It's a little bit more difficult sometimes to fix. So, it's kind of like, not to say that, planting the bad seed of, if you encounter problems, contact us. But we want you to come to us first before you encounter problems, and make the whole thing more because moving country is very stressful, ultimately. So why put more stress? I mean, even for myself, I can make a transfer myself. I ring Steve, one of the dealers, and he does it for me.
Yeah.
Because I've got so much going on. Me typing an IBAN number into the system, I probably put the wrong digit because I'm too busy thinking. Right, when I was in the middle of moving house, Yeah,
there's so many things, like the ones that you can delegate to better people. Do that, right?
Yes, exactly.
Okay, so Sarah, it was an immense pleasure to be here with you. I am very grateful to know you and to be a part of your life, and I am so glad that you moved closer to me.
Yeah.
In fact, we have like that special pastry shop that we can now all go. And I would really like to thank you and your availability and everything to speak to me and talk a little bit about yourself. And I hope to continue to see you grow and expand and thrive in Portugal. And of course, whatever you need, I'm here. So thank you so much.
No, thank you for having me. And as I said, I would advocate that people should move to Portugal. It is an amazing place. But as I said, there is still the emotional side, and things are different to your home country. So I think people have to understand that, but it isn't always a negative. There's lots of positives.
See, everybody. Okay, thank you. Bye-bye. See you.
Bye.